In this research case study presentation, we'll analyze two cases of defamation, a decade apart: 1964's New York Times Company versus Sullivan, and 1974's Gertz versus Robert Welch Inc. This presentation is part of New Media Journalism Studies, and I am Stephanie Arechiga. Part 1: New York Times Company versus Sullivan. Who are the parties to the case and what facts led to their dispute? The parties involved include the petitioner, the New York Times, and the respondent, Sullivan, a public elected official overseeing the police department. The New York Times published a full-page advertisement highlighting an extraordinary surge of terror targeting individuals involved in the civil rights movement. The advertisement stated that the police action was directed toward students who participated in civil rights demonstration. Sullivan says that the statements had to refer to him since his duties included oversight of the police department. Why did Sullivan feel his reputation was damaged by the New York Times publication? Since the publication indirectly referred to him because Sullivan oversaw the police department, and some of the particulars in the article were false. The trial judge said the statements were libelous per se, a statement that is damaging in itself, and the words are damaging to the affected person, in this case, Sullivan. What are the critical elements of a defamation claim? And since Sullivan was a public official, what did he have to prove in this case? Defamation is false statements of fact that a reasonable person would believe to be true. Public figures must meet a higher standard to win defamation cases. The Supreme Court overturned the ruling because Sullivan was a public figure, and public figures cannot recover damages for defamatory falsehood relating to their conduct unless there is proof of actual malice, and Sullivan failed to produce evidence. The Supreme Court granted the overturning of the case for several reasons surrounding the protection of the First and 14th Amendment, especially with criticisms to a public elected official. Part 2: Gertz versus Welch. Who are the parties to the case? Was the petitioner a private person or a public figure? Welch is a magazine publisher, and Gertz is a private person involved in a high profile case, a case against a police officer on trial for murder. What were the alleged defamatory statements about Gertz in the American Opinion article? Gertz was accused of being a communist, and the famous trial of policeman Nucio was actually a communist conspiracy to overthrow the police, with Gertz being the mastermind behind it all and part of a Marxist League plot. What was done to confirm the accuracy of these allegations against Gertz? The publisher actually did not confirm the accuracy, and during the trial, it came out that they didn't do their due diligence in attempting to provide facts to what they were reporting. How do you think these allegations affected Gertz's reputation? At this time, communism was a very real threat in the United States, and it was an irreprehensible accusation to be tied to a treasonous group. Every state has their own criteria when it comes to defamation cases. California has specific criteria that does not waver far from the federal criteria. Publication of a fact that is false, unprivileged, has a natural tendency to injure, or which causes special damage, and the defendant's fault in publishing the statement amounted to at least negligence. What would you have done differently than Welch to avoid the lawsuit? I honestly would not have published such defamatory statements without proof, or at least attempting to find some truth or falseness in what I was reporting. It just seemed as if the writer simply thought something negative and put it to print. How can you relate what you learned from the Sullivan and Gertz cases to your future work in communication? I 100% believe it's essential to cover your bases and do your due diligence to find the truth. And if there's ever a time when something is inaccurately reported or published, there should be a correction or just retract the entire publication to begin with. Because I want to pursue advocacy journalism, it's important for me to make sure I'm researching and finding sources to report the right and correct information, and hopefully to gain and gather trust from people who read my work.